King Wen had been hoping for someone insightful and astute, just like this, to be one of his ministers. Therefore, he hired Liu Shang and gave him the title Taegong Wang, which roughly means the Great Duke's Hope. In Japanese, this is called Teikubu. This story is where the word comes from to refer to a devoted fisherman. There are a couple of ways to handle the translation of the word in our passage. One option would be to use the historical reference directly. We could describe him, Lacan, as someone who might have been called a regular jiangzier. However, there is a question with this approach. It concerns how literally Great Duke's Hope or jiangzier is being used in the original text. Japanese readers may recognize the reference. Teikubu appears as a character in other pop culture sources, most notably the manga and anime Hoshin Enji or Soul Hunter. But should we consider Jiangziya as a figure who actually existed in the world of the Apothecary Diaries? Is he as prominent an exemplar of military virtue in this world as he is in ours? I believe that is not the intention. Jiangziya is being invoked in essence metaphorically. The point is not Jiangziya personally, but rather the idea of a brilliant strategist, perhaps one who could easily be overlooked. It would have been possible to leave out the reference entirely. We could have just used the gloss we ended up with. It says in some other era he might have been considered a great military mind waiting to be discovered. Having said that, I do not think the historical referent is the main point. However, I do think it is probably a secondary point. Is it simply a coincidence that this Chinese-influenced series uses a term with a Chinese historical reference to make its point? Probably not. That suggests it would be helpful to include the reference in English somehow. But what is the best way to do it? In Japanese, Jiangziya is not referred to by his proper name. Instead, he is known by a prominent nickname. This somewhat lessens the impact of the question regarding his historical existence in this setting. In contrast, no English equivalent Teikubu, Great Duke Wang, or the Great Duke's Hope has the same combination of common usage and meaning. When I made this decision, I also considered how easily people could search for the reference if they wanted to learn more. My solution was the expression a sleeping dragon. This was the nickname of Zhuge Liang, sometimes known by his courtesy name Kongaming. He was a military strategist and advisor to Liu Bei, the ruler of the state of Shu Han in the early 3rd century. Kongaming is most famous from the stories in Romance of the Three Kingdoms. He remains a well-known and popular figure in both Chinese and Japanese culture today. Although he was a brilliant strategist, he kept to himself. This was until Liu Bei personally came to request his assistance. He was called a sleeping dragon because he remained quiet and inconspicuous. Kongaming's story is very much like that of Liu Shang, although they come from different time periods and sources. Both stand in the grand Chinese tradition of great strategists. They wait like a jewel buried in a field for the right ruler to find them. With this move, we get many of the same virtues as the Japanese Teikubu. It is an indirect reference to a famous ancient Chinese strategist discovered by a discerning ruler. Using his sobriquet rather than his actual name allows us to avoid the question of exactly how real the character is in this setting. Just as Teikubu is an evocative and interesting phrase, it comes from Chinese origins. Readers who are interested can easily find more information about it online. I also added the clause a great military mind waiting to be discovered because I thought Japanese readers would understand this from the term Teikubu. Therefore, there was no reason to deny English readers the same understanding, even if they did not look up the reference. It also helps that the clause has a nice weight and rhythm, giving the sentence some balance. To be clear, this kind of translation, where the English rendering is inspired by but loosely connected to the Japanese, is not common. In fact, I cannot think of another case where I have had to make a move quite like this. But I think it is a good illustration of the kinds of intuitive leaps translators sometimes have to make. It also shows how much knowledge in the subject area can help when making those choices. Thanks again for reading the Apothecary Diaries. I hope to see you in Volume 3. Sign up for our mailing list at J Novel Club to hear about new releases. You can also read the latest chapters. Volume 3 of this series is available by becoming a J Novel Club member. J Novel Club membership. Copyright The Apothecary Diaries Volume 2 by Natsu Hyuga. Illustrations by Taoko Shino. Translated by Kevin Steinbach. Edited by Sasha McGlynn. This book is a work of fiction. Names, characters, places, and incidents are the product of the author's imagination or are used fictitiously. Any resemblance to actual events, locales, or persons, living or dead, is coincidental. Kyusaria no Hitaragoto. Copyright Natsuhyuga 2015. All rights reserved. Originally published in Japan by Shufunatomo Infos Co. Limited. Through Shufunatomo Co. Limited. This English edition is published by arrangement with Shufunatomo Co. Limited, of Tokyo. English translation copyright 2021 J Novel Club LLC. All rights reserved. In accordance with the U.S. Copyright Act of 1976, scanning, uploading, and electronically sharing any part of this book without the publisher's permission is unlawful piracy and theft of the author's intellectual property. J Novel Club LLC. J Novel Club. The publisher is not responsible for websites or their content that are not owned by the publisher. This ebook edition is version 1.0, published in June of 2021.